I visited with Frédéric, in fact, the exhibition, and the first striking feeling was about your childhood. You are very faithful to your childhood, like, for example, with the comic books that you use as a reference. Could you tell me something about that?
Well, the magazine of my kind of teenager, that particular magazine was influential perhaps because of the particular way that they would bring to life the technology of the day and the technology of the future. So the drawings were interesting because they were cut through. So you could see the inner workings of an aircraft or a locomotive or an automobile. And also how can I express this? The future was always going to be better and brighter. And I still believe that today.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. You are not so many to think like that. Why do you think the future will be better?
Because the trend of everything is that people are living longer, that they're healthier, the standard of living, notwithstanding what we might read in our newspapers, just statistically, is better than those in the past.
Yeah, but the
I'm not talking about opinion. I'm talking about statistics.
Yeah.
We live longer. We live more comfortably. We're less subject to wars, notwithstanding the horrors of wars, but we have longer periods of peace and prosperity. And I'm not talking about opinion. I'm just talking about the hard data.
Yes, right. So, but who was this little boy living in England in a middle class who has so many dreams?
Yes,
You are still the same, you think, or you change a lot?
No, I think I'm still very childlike in my passions, in my obsessions. As I was saying, I really do believe in a future that's brighter, healthier, cleaner, and I still get the pleasure in many of the things that I experienced as when I was younger.
But the exhibition is very original in the fact that you are showing your obsession more than your real life projects. It's like diving into your brain, more than seeing what you have built.
Well, it celebrates 6 decades of practice, and at the entrance there are 10,000 names of colleagues who, since 1963, have made this exhibition possible. So, on the one hand, yes, there's the reality that architecture, infrastructure is a team activity. There are huge number of individuals, enterprises involved. But the president here, President Le Bon, the curator, Frédéric Migaro, they've encouraged me to bring forth influences and inspirations in the form of, for example, an automobile that belonged to Le Corbusier in the 20s and would
We will speak
appear.
about that. But what I'm interested in this case is that, for example, the first room is a room of drawing. It's not a room of photos about
Exactly.
what you
Well,
like. So it's about your dreams. It's about what you think more than what you have built. So it's a very special position, behavior, in fact, for this exhibition, which is the biggest ever organized, I think, at Centre Pompidou for architecture.
Yes, it's the first time that this gallery, which is enormous, has been devoted to to architecture and infrastructure issues of the city.
But you are
And
showing your mind, not really focusing on the reality. We don't see much building in photos at the entrance. It's your drawings, your dreams, no?
yes, well, if the exhibition starts with a sketch, then perhaps that's a metaphor for a building or a bridge which starts with a sketch, and in more formal terms, drawings. So that perhaps sets the stage for the exhibition, which unfolds and is essentially models, drawings, and as you move around, it's punctuated by screens, and the screens bring to life the building. So you can see the built reality, which follows from those exploratory models. So you can see the process of design. For example, Apple is a circular building. You would assume that that was a kind of first thought, but alongside that circular building, there were probably about 20 models of the schemes that led to that, and out of which finally the circle evolved. So it's perhaps giving the visitor an insight into the processes of design.
And I've been told that you are obsessed by drawing. You are always drawing.
Well, I also bring forth the drawings of many other individuals.
No, but for example, when you go to the restaurant, it happens that you draw.
Of course, I draw all the time.
But what
in
you draw?
taxis, in planes.
Really? Like the little boy before.
Exactly. Nothing changes.
What about Brancusi? How Brancusi is important for you?
Well, again, I was encouraged by the curator to juxtapose works of Brancusi, and you can see the early phase of Brancusi before, reportedly, he went to an air show and saw for the first time a propeller with his fellow artists and said, in effect, this is the end of sculpture. But it was for him the beginning of a new phase of sculpture. And we have two Brancusis here in the exhibition, one which is the timber endless column, quite rustic but geometric, and then the very streamlined l'oiseau, the bird, and coincidentally, a propeller which was a gift from my wife, a DC3 polished chrome propeller alongside. So there are certain resonances. And if I think about the buildings, I can divide the buildings into those buildings which are an expression of a smooth skin, rather like the streamlined forms of the works of artists like Brancusi. So it's not too literal. I would never say, as a designer, I would do this because of what an artist has done. But there are resonances, and perhaps in another way, I'm fascinated by the common denominators between design, the so-called fine arts of painting and sculpture, and craftsmanship. For me, they're all expressions of an artistic initiative. So I'm mentally very much about breaking down the barriers between these different silos. For me, they're all art.
And at the air show with Brancusi, there was Marcel Duchamp, I think, who happened to say Marcel Duchamp was at the air show too.
Yes, with Brancusi. Yes.
And he used to say that he was a craftsman, in fact. And in the show, there's one very big fan of Marcel Duchamp who is Ai Weiwei. Why are you showing an Ai Weiwei piece?
Well, The Ai Weiwei piece is called Divine Proportion. It was a gift from Ai Weiwei to my wife and myself, to our family. And it's named the Foster Divine Proportion. And if you see it alongside the structures of Buckminster Fuller, and I collaborated with Buckminster Fuller, his geodesic structures, there's an immediate resonance. And when you see those elements next to each other, there's a visual pairing, which is not intentional, it's not deliberate, but we are all influenced by those who've gone before us. We're all the subject of influences. We may translate those influences in a very personal way. So it's not copying something, but it is being inspired, being influenced. And some of those are very direct, and some of them are more subliminal.
And what about your relation with Ai Weiwei?
He's an artist that through my wife I met a long time ago, before he was known, as it were, on the world stage. So in the very early days of going to Beijing, and I have a great respect for him, and I think that he enables us to see things like any artist, perhaps in a different way.
In fact, I curated a show with him in Marseille a few years ago.
Really? Really?
Yeah. Yes. And you collect cars. Why? What's the point about cars? You have a big passion for cars, as we could see it in Bilbao, right?
Exactly. I think that they, I mean, at Bilbao, I brought to life the studio that that creates cars, and cars, even in a digital age, are still sculpted literally out of clay, full size. So the process of designing, of making a car, is remarkably similar to the studios of Renaissance artists, in terms of literally working full size in clay as prototypes, as mock-ups. And I think that perhaps the object of that exhibition was perhaps to enable the visitor to look again, to look afresh at an everyday object, to juxtapose, perhaps in one gallery you might remember, I called it Sculptured, and it had 4 extraordinary automobiles. I mean, just very, very beautiful objects, yes, even if they were standing still, with a Calder and a Henry Moore reclining figure. And it's interesting that exhibition broke all records for attendance. And in the words of the director of the museum, it brought a new kind of person who would never go into a museum.
What you want?
But was, perhaps somebody who would be interested in automobiles, but not have an interest in sculpture or art or wider aspects of design, and seeing these objects and memorabilia side by side would be given a new perspective, a new insight, and so I think that the car over time, if I perhaps remind myself of some of the concept cars alongside the futurist paintings and sculpture, it's almost as if the artists had anticipated the cars of the future in their work. So there was an extraordinary resonance between the futurist painters and sculptures and the cars that would appear 4 or 5 decades later.
And what do you think about the cars today?
I think they're probably undoubtedly safer, quieter, more economic, and boring.
I was sure. Do you drive a car yourself?
Of course I do, yes.
What kind of car?
Well, I have the luxury of driving one kind of car, a Mini, say, at one point, and then being able to enjoy a classic, another kind of classic car. But I enjoy those cars with character and personality.
The old ones.
Yes.
And let's speak about L'Ombrière, the shelter, the canopy of Marseille. You have chosen that for the billboard. It's the image of the exhibition, but in fact, it's more a sculpture or an object than a building, right? What's the story? What's the story about this object?
It's totally ambiguous. I mean, it is a venue for markets, for events, for gatherings. It has an element of spectacle because it's polished stainless steel like a mirror. So it turns the world literally upside down above your head. It's an element of provocation, if you like, in a much more important and bigger picture, because that project in Marseille was about reconnecting the old port back to the city. It was about restoring the balance, depriving the car, if you like, of its excess of space, and getting a better balance for the city, making it more walkable, pedestrian friendly, bringing back the signature cafes, terraces, and a new kind of civility, making it fresher, cleaner, and more friendly, and but putting the car.
Sculpture. It's a sculpture.
Sorry?
It's a sculpture.
Yes. Yes, it's a sculpture. Yes, but it's also highly functional. I mean, it is a gathering point for events, for celebrations, for markets, for buying, for it's yes. But you're right. It is ambiguous. It is a sculpture.
And there's another ambiguity, which is you have built all over the world many buildings, and you have chosen this building to symbolize your exhibition. Why? Not this
because
object.
Because it's about the city. It's about people. It's a gathering point. It's a reminder of the importance of the city. The city is the future, and in a way, it's also, you know, we're here at Centre Pompidou. It is France. Some of our most important projects have been realized in France, and that is again, it's as much about the city, about the place, as it is about a building. So I think it's broader in its appeal beyond an individual building. It's about a place. And the city is our future. It's the greatest invention, if you like.
And but in fact, in Paris, there's no big building that one can say Norman Foster is here.
No, it still has to happen.
So do you have any project now here?
Not in that sense in Paris, no.
And that's another paradox. The huge exhibition, but no big building here. So probably the exhibition
life goes on, there's still the future.
Good. And you are still very optimistic. Last question is about beauty. What is a room for beauty? And your beauty seems very technical in a way.
I think beauty is a timeless element. It can be about capturing a view. It can be about capturing a shaft of sunlight. It's about contact with nature, a skyline. It's less about the materiality of the building. It's about all of our senses, and the materials of the projects here range from everything from wood to marble to stone to concrete to steel to glass. It's there isn't a common denominator in that sense. They're all explorations, but they're really very much about the spirit as much as the material comforts.
And what are you excited by now?
I'm excited by everything in the visual world.
Like what?
Like walking through a city, like walking through Paris, through discovering streets, spaces, places, individual buildings. I'm excited by the age in which we live.
Bon. I remember because I interviewed you last time in Nîmes, and you were very much into contemporary art, like Thomas.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah, yes. So I was invited to curate, and interestingly, I think that today is the 30th anniversary of that building.
Yes. Are you going there?
No, I'm here for the 60th anniversary of practicing as an architect. So you could say that Nîmes is my halfway point.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.